Hello and welcome to February's Miniature of the Month painting guide, month 2 of Pushing Yourself. We are going to be showing how we can tint things using filters, as this is a precursor to glazing. Paint lists are on the screen and in the description. You will also need contrast medium. Now, if you could press that like button and subscribe, it'd be greatly appreciated. We start off with Mini primed in white and covering it with 2 thin coats of Rakarth Flesh to get a nice opaque layer. Don't be afraid to be messing here, we will tidy up the messy parts later. With the Rakarth Flesh down, we can now start the process of tinting. For this, we are going to be using a mix of 1 part Biel-Tan Green to 2 parts contrast medium. This is to help the wash flow into the recesses more, as well as stay on the higher sections and tint it. You could also use different colours for this. You could use purple or blue to get more deathly looking skin tones. Once the tint is dry, we come back in with 2 parts Rakarth Flesh to 1 part water and pick out the larger areas with a brush, removing any tea staining and knocking back the green a bit. After we have done that with the Rakarth Flesh, we do the same with Pallid Wych Flesh. This is another desaturated colour but will really sell the undead look we're going for. Try and make this area smaller than the last and focus this on areas in the head and the top of the body where your eye is going to be drawn to the model. Don't worry about doing it on feet or hands. Now we come back in with a tint again. The last tint left the model a bit too green and saturated for my liking, so we're going to take the same mix a bit of black into it and go over the whole model again. This is really just to desaturate the model down and remove too much of that warm green warmth. I then cover everything that isn't the skin black so we can take advantage of some deep shadows as we move on to the fur. For this I use a base of Screamer Pink, and in the same way we did with the fur for the Beastmen in January, we start to build up the layers, focusing more and more on the top parts of the fur and getting progressively smaller and smaller. I then mix in Wild Rider Red into the Screamer Pink and continue the same process on an even smaller area than last time. Finally, mixing in some Pallid Wych Flesh and focusing this on the topmost parts of the fur, even smaller than last time. From here we base coat the cloth in Rakarth Flesh. No need to be tidy here, just try and avoid the deepest shadows to make sure there's still black showing in there. We take Mournfang Brown and mix it with contrast medium in a 1:2 ratio-ish and make sure we cover all of the cloth with this mix. This is going to tint the cloth again to a more brown colour while also keep some of our highlighting that we've just done from the shadows and the Rakarth Flesh. After that, we dot the eyes with Wild Rider Red using our sharpest tiff brush before we come in with Rakarth Flesh for the teeth. While we have the Rakarth Flesh out, we'll go back into the cloth and to re-highlight that with the Rakarth Flesh, the same way we did with the skin. The bones that are exposed are now painted with Mournfang Brown, and we cover them to make sure they're opaque, so don't use the tint for this. We then go down to the sword and start to cover that in Mournfang Brown as well, just dabbing that on and allowing some of the black to show through. We're going for a rusty look on the sword, so no need to keep it shiny at all. To finish off the bones, we mix Rakarth Flesh with contrast medium and do a couple of coats across the bones, letting them dry fully between coats. We want to do this in again about a 1:2 ratio, but no need to be too specific here. Rhinox Hide is now added onto the sword in a dabbing motion so as to put a bit more visual interest there before we come in with Stormhost Silver and start to do scratches, dabbing all over the sword and putting that really shiny look to the rusty sword we've got going. I put this a bit too far, so I had to come back in afterwards with Mournfang Brown and just reapply some of that rust all over the place. The cloth of the sword hilt is given a quick coat of Screamer Pink, and the mini is done. Onto the base. For the base, I'm going simple, starting with watered down Rhinox Hide directly over texture paste, before just coming in with Mournfang Brown watered down again and just splodging it into the base to create an uneven look, making sure the two paints are still kind of wet at the same time. Kind of wet blending, but we're not going to be too fancy about it. From here, I mix in Rakarth Flesh into the Mournfang Brown and just start to draw lines all over base. I'm doing these kind of in the motion of the direction of which he's walking, doesn't really matter how. I repeat this a couple of times, adding in more Rakarth Flesh, before finally I come in with a quick dry brush of Pallid Witch Flesh all over the top, just to pick up the highest areas of the texture base. Now, no base is complete without a ribbing, so we make sure we come in and paint it black, and we're all done with the mini. So, hopefully with this mini you've gotten a little understanding of tinting. By adding contrast medium into washes and paint, they want to make the paint seek out the recesses and also tint the tones of the minis. There's not much difference between this and glazing, as you can water down your paints enough to a glaze and you get the same effect across the mini. So congratulations on your first lessons into glazing. I don't know what next month of mini will be yet, but I think we're ready to push ourselves a bit, and hopefully it'll be a nice Space Marine that we can do some stippling and a bit of light placement.